There is a story that rail fans have been whispering to each other for over 50 years. The story goes like this. Somewhere in the world, sealed behind a locked door in the side of a mountain, sits a secret army of steam locomotives, hundreds of them. Coated in grease, boilers full of nitrogen, lined up in the dark, waiting for the end of the world. And the reason they are there, the story says, is classified. Nobody will tell you why. It is one of the greatest legends in all of railroading. And like most great legends, it is part nonsense and part something far stranger and far more real than the legend itself. Because there really were secret hoards of steam locomotives sealed away, kept ready for the apocalypse. Just not where the story says. And the truth of why they were hidden is one of the strangest, most haunting chapters of the entire Cold War. So let us separate the myth from the machine. Let us find out what is really sealed in that mountain. Before we get into it, hit subscribe and drop a comment, letting us know where you're watching from. We want to know who's out there. Start with the legend, because you have to understand the legend before you can understand the truth. In Britain, the country that invented the railway, there is a myth so famous among enthusiasts it has its own name, the Strategic Steam Reserve. The story took hold in the late 1960s, right after British Railways scrapped the last of its mainline steam, and a lot of railwaymen simply could not believe it was really gone. All those thousands of powerful modern locomotives, some of them only a few years old, dragged off to the cutter's torch. It felt like a waste too enormous to be true. So the whisper began. They did not really scrap them all. Some were saved, taken away in the dead of night, sealed in a tunnel, kept in secret for when the country would need them again. And the favorite hiding place in the whole legend was a tunnel. Box Tunnel in Wiltshire, a great Victorian bore driven through the hills by Isambard Kingdom Brunel himself. The story said that behind a hidden door in Box Tunnel, hundreds of steam locomotives sat mothballed in the dark. People swore they had seen the trains go in. People swore they knew men who had signed the Official Secrets Act to guard them. The tale grew with every telling. 500 engines, 600, sealed in the mountain, reason classified. There is only one problem. It is not true. And the people who actually went and checked proved it. Here is what the investigators found. The records of Britain's scrapped steam locomotives are complete. Every single engine is accounted for, its withdrawal and its destruction documented. There is no gap, no fleet of hundreds that vanished off the books. And Box Tunnel itself? The section where the trains were supposedly hidden was too low. The diesels that actually worked that stretch had to have their cabs cut down to fit. A full-height steam locomotive could not even have got in there. Many of the other sites the legend named were not even connected to the railway at all. They were warehouses with no tracks running to them. You cannot hide a secret train in a building a train cannot reach. Historians who study this are blunt about it. The British Strategic Steam Reserve is a myth. A powerful, beautiful, recurring myth built out of wishful thinking by people who could not bear to watch the age of steam die. There is no mountain full of British locomotives. There never was. So that should be the end of the story. Except it is not. Because here is the twist that the clickbait never tells you. While the British Reserve was pure legend, other countries were doing the exact thing the legend described, for real. And the reason why is genuinely chilling. To understand it, you have to put yourself in the mind of a military planner in the 1950s and 1960s, staring down the possibility of nuclear war. Think about what a modern railway actually depends on. Electricity to run the electric locomotives and the signals. Diesel fuel refined from imported oil to run the diesel fleet. Now detonate a nuclear weapon. Two things happen to that railway. First, the oil supply could be cut off in an instant, stranding every diesel. And second, and this is the part that haunted the planners, a nuclear blast releases an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP, a massive surge of electromagnetic energy that can destroy solid-state electronics, the delicate transistors and circuits that modern machines rely on. In theory, the pulse from a nuclear detonation could fry the control systems of an entire nation's diesel and electric locomotives in a single flash, leaving them as useless lumps of dead metal on the rails. And what survives that? What keeps running when the grid is down, the oil is gone, and every microchip in the country is fried? A steam locomotive. A machine with no electronics whatsoever, no transistors, no circuits, nothing to fry. It runs on fire and water and iron. It does not care about electromagnetic pulses because it has nothing for a pulse to destroy. You can burn coal in it. You can burn wood. You can burn almost anything. Even contaminated radioactive water, undrinkable and deadly, will still boil into perfectly good steam. In the nightmare of a post-nuclear world, the oldest technology on the railway suddenly became the only technology that would still work. The planners took this so seriously that it shaped other decisions too. There is a widely repeated belief that Soviet military aircraft of the era were fitted with old-fashioned vacuum tube electronics rather than modern transistors, precisely because the bulky old tubes were thought to shrug off an electromagnetic pulse that would destroy delicate solid-state circuits. Whether or not every detail of that is true, it tells you how deeply the fear of an electromagnetic pulse ran through Cold War thinking. An entire generation of planners looked at their modern machines and saw a hidden weakness, and looked at the crude old steam engine and saw something that could not be switched off by an enemy. It is worth being honest here. Historians point out that the diesel locomotives of that early period actually contained very little of the sensitive solid-state electronics that a pulse would harm, so the fear may have been greater than the real danger. But fear does not need to be perfectly accurate to change history. The planners believed it, and belief was enough to build a secret fleet. So several countries did exactly what the British legend only imagined. They kept a strategic steam reserve. And the first one to admit it openly was not some secretive dictatorship. It was Sweden. Sweden, neutral and cautious, sitting right across the water from the Soviet Union, took the threat deadly seriously. As it modernized its railways and withdrew its steam locomotives, it did not scrap them all. It hid them. It built and used locked sheds, with rails running inside them, and then physically disconnected those rails from the main line, so there was no visible link, no clue as to what was inside. The engines were mothballed, greased, and kept in a state where they could be brought back to life. And the Swedes kept this reserve quietly for decades. And here is the detail that gives me chills. Sweden did not disband its last strategic steam reserve in the 1970s, or the 1980s, or even the 1990s. It kept those locomotives ready until 2016. One of the very last, a locomotive numbered 954, had sat waiting in the dark for 45 years. 45 years of standing silent in a shed, oiled and ready in case the world ended. In June of 2016, they finally brought it out and lit its fire for the last time. After nearly half a century asleep, it built up enough pressure to blow its whistle one more time. A single note from a machine that had spent its whole life waiting for a war that, thank God, never came. And then it was over. The reserve was disbanded. Finland kept one too, structured against the fear of a Soviet invasion. But the biggest, and the one that comes closest to the legend of the sealed mountain, belonged to the Soviet Union itself. The Soviet Union was a country built on its railways. The Trans-Siberian was not just a line, it was the spine of the entire nation, thousands of miles of track holding a continent together. And Soviet planners understood that in a nuclear war, that spine had to keep working no matter what. So they built a steam reserve on a scale that dwarfed everyone else's. Not hundreds of locomotives, thousands of them. The star of that reserve was a locomotive called the Class L. Between 1945 and 1955, the Soviet factory at Kolomna built 4,199 of them. A rugged, powerful freight engine, 92 tons, hauling a tender packed with 18 tons of coal, capable of 80 kilometers an hour. And as the Soviets modernized and pulled these engines from regular service through the 70s, the 80s, and into the 90s, huge numbers of them did not go to the scrapyard. They went into the reserve. And this is where the Soviet version genuinely earns the legend. The locomotives were deliberately dispersed, scattered to special depots, many of them tucked away in rural and mountainous regions, chosen precisely because they were far from the cities and military bases that would be the targets in a nuclear strike. Some were kept indoors in controlled conditions to hold back the rust. The locations were kept off civilian maps, and the workers assigned to maintain them were sworn to secrecy, held to the kind of confidentiality you would expect at a military base. A secret fleet of steam engines hidden in the mountains, guarded by men forbidden to speak of them, waiting for the end of the world. The legend was real. It was just Russian. And keeping them was not as simple as parking a locomotive and walking away. A steam locomotive is a demanding thing to store. Left to the weather, it rusts, its boiler corrodes, its moving parts seize. So the reserve engines had to be actively maintained, greased and protected, and turned over for decade after decade against a war that kept not happening. There was another problem too, one the British legend never grappled with. Steam locomotives need an entire world of support to run. They need water towers and coaling stages and ash pits and turntables, and the skilled men who know how to coax them to life. As every country modernized, all of that supporting infrastructure was torn down because nobody needed it anymore. So even a perfectly preserved reserve engine faced a hard question. In the chaos after a nuclear war, with the water towers demolished and the coal stages gone, and the last generation of firemen retiring or dead, could anyone actually run these machines? It took 6 to 8 hours just to raise steam in a big locomotive from cold. The reserves were a bet that in the worst moment imaginable, a nation could somehow rebuild the lost art of steam faster than it could rebuild everything else. It was never a comfortable bet, but it was better than nothing, and nothing was the only other option. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the whole program fell apart. There was no money, no strategic direction, and the railways were being carved up and privatized. Most of the reserve was scrapped or quietly sold off, and in the end, only a handful survived. Near the Russian city of Roslavl, researchers found the ghosts of the program, around a dozen Class L locomotives still lined up, but rotting now, rusting away in the open. The last survivors of a secret fleet of thousands, a fleet built to outlive the apocalypse, left to die slowly in a field because the apocalypse never came, and the country that built them ceased to exist first. So here is the truth nobody tells you. There is no mountain in England packed with 600 secret British locomotives. That is a fairy tale, and a lovely one, but a fairy tale. The real strategic steam reserves were in Sweden, in Finland, and above all in the Soviet Union. They really were hidden. They really were kept secret. They really were scattered through remote and mountainous country, sworn to silence, greased and sleeping in the dark. And the reason really was, in a sense, classified, because the reason was the coldest calculation of the Cold War. When the bombs fell and the lights went out and every modern machine died, the plan was to roll open a shed door somewhere in the wilderness, light a fire under a 19th century machine, and use the oldest technology on the railway to carry a shattered nation through the end of the world. The machines waited for decades. In Sweden, one of them waited 45 years. And the greatest thing you can say about all of them, every last sealed and silent engine, is that the whistle they were built to blow in the darkest moment in human history was never needed. They waited for the end, and the end never came.